300 people were on the water that night. Boats packed side by side. Music so loud you couldn't hear the person standing next to you. Fireworks lighting up the Mississippi sky on the 4th of July. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, an 18-year-old boy disappeared. No splash. No scream. No warning. One moment he was there, laughing with his friends. The next moment he was gone. 3 days later, his body washed up on an island. Not the island where the party was happening. A different island. Federal land. Miles away. Out of 300 witnesses, not a single person says they saw what happened to him. Not one. Think about that for a second. 300 people. And somehow, nobody saw a young man vanish right in front of them. By the time this video is over, you're going to have your own theory about what really happened that night. And I want you to put it in the comments because right now, even the people investigating this case don't have an answer. This is the disappearance of Nolan Wells. And I promise you, the deeper we go, the stranger this case gets. Welcome back to Untold Crime Diaries. If this is your first time here, this is the channel where we dig into the cases the mainstream news covers for 30 days and then quietly forgets about. The cases with more questions than answers. If that sounds like your kind of story, hit subscribe now because we drop a new one every single week and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Before we talk about how Nolan Wells died, you need to understand who he was. Because this wasn't a troubled kid. This wasn't someone anyone expected to end up in the headlines. Nolan grew up in Mississippi, raised by his parents, Elmore and Christine Wells. Everyone who knew him describes him the same way. Friendly. Easygoing. The kind of kid who got along with everybody, no matter their background. His teammates say he never met a stranger in his life. Football was everything to him. His father trained with him for years, believing his son had a real future in the sport. And this year, it looked like that dream was finally about to happen. Coaches were noticing him. Scouts were paying attention. This was supposed to be his breakout season. He was 18 years old, just 10 days away from his 19th birthday. He had, by every account, everything to live for. And then came the 4th of July. It was an unofficial tradition along that stretch of the Mississippi coast. Every year, boats gathered just offshore for the holiday. Music, coolers, fireworks, teenagers, and young adults hopping from boat to boat all evening long. Nolan was there with a group of friends he'd known for years. By all accounts, it started as a normal night. A good night even. And then, at some point, without anyone noticing exactly when, Nolan was no longer with the group. Some of the young men who were there that night later told investigators the music was deafening. The boats were packed so close together you could barely move between them. People were drinking. People were coming and going in the dark, boat to boat, all night long. It was exactly the kind of chaotic, crowded scene where a person could slip away completely unnoticed, or where something far worse could happen and still, somehow, go unseen. When his friends realized he was missing, panic set in immediately. They searched the boats. They searched the water. They screamed his name into the darkness, over and over. Nothing. By the time authorities were called in, Nolan Wells was already gone. For 3 days, his parents didn't know if their son was alive or dead. 3 days of unbearable silence while search crews combed the water for any sign of him. Then, on July 7th, his body was found. Not near the party. Not anywhere close to the hundreds of boats anchored that night. He washed ashore on Horn Island. I want you to remember that detail because it is about to become the center of this entire case. Horn Island isn't just some random stretch of coastline. It's federally protected land, overseen by the National Park Service. And that one fact is going to raise a question almost nobody in the mainstream media has bothered to ask. But first, let's talk about what happened after his body was found. Because this is where the case completely splits in two. The local medical examiner performed the first autopsy. According to the family's legal team, the early word coming out of local authorities was that there was no evidence of foul play. A tragic drowning. Nothing more. But Nolan's parents refused to accept that answer. And if you were in their position, would you? Their attorney, nationally recognized civil rights lawyer Ben Crump, along with Reverend Al Sharpton, stepped in almost immediately. They demanded a second, independent autopsy conducted by a forensic pathologist the family trusted. But here's the problem. By the time that second examination happened, the body had already been through the first autopsy. Tissue samples had already been taken. Days had passed in the Mississippi heat. Getting a clean, conclusive second opinion after that is nearly impossible. So now there are two competing stories. One side says there is no evidence of a crime. This was a tragic accident, and outside voices are politicizing something that was never a crime to begin with. The other side says, how can you rule out foul play before a full, transparent investigation is even finished? And caught in the middle of all of it are two parents who simply want to know how their son died. Nolan's mother, Christine, said something in a press conference that I have not been able to shake. She said, quote, "Many parents out there still have their children. You still can hug them. You still can call them. We do not have that anymore. Whatever you believe happened out on that water, that is a mother who buried her son 10 days before his 19th birthday." Now here's where the case gets even stranger. Because while the family is publicly demanding answers, the district attorney's office has gone almost completely silent. No detailed statement on cause of death. No public timeline. No update on whether anyone is considered a person of interest. Instead, the case was quietly sent to a grand jury. A secret proceeding held entirely behind closed doors. Why would a case like this go straight to a grand jury without any public explanation at all? There are two ways to look at that. Either the prosecutor is simply being careful, protecting the integrity of an active investigation and refusing to leak details that could compromise it. Or there is something inside that investigation that nobody wants the public to see just yet. Which one do you believe? I genuinely want to know. Drop your answer in the comments, because on our last case breakdown, this community's comments actually changed my own theory by the end of the video. Now, remember Horn Island? Here's why that detail matters so much. Horn Island is federal land, which means that legally, Nolan Wells' body was discovered not on property overseen by the state of Mississippi, but by the government of the United States. And that raises a massive question almost nobody has asked publicly. Why hasn't the National Park Service opened its own independent death investigation? Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who tragically lost her own son to gun violence years ago, has publicly pushed the Congressional Black Caucus to demand a full federal review, separate entirely from the local investigation. Letters have reportedly already been sent to federal authorities. Because here is the uncomfortable truth this case keeps circling back to. Local investigators and federal investigators do not always reach the same conclusions. And when a death occurs on federal land, federal law enforcement arguably has a duty to be involved. So, why has there been silence? Now, a real investigation has to look at every single angle, and there is another side of this story that deserves to be heard. The young men who were with Nolan that night have come forward publicly, saying their entire lives have been turned upside down. They describe receiving death threats, being recognized and confronted in public, inside restaurants, inside stores. One of them claims he was denied service at a local business simply because his face had been circulated online. Their attorney insists they have fully cooperated with investigators from the very first day, sitting for interviews and answering every question law enforcement has asked them. And here is the uncomfortable question that cases like this always force us to confront. Does full cooperation with police prove innocence? Or does it just prove someone is smart enough to cooperate? I'm not going to answer that for you. I want you to sit with that question because a grand jury is going to have to wrestle with exactly that. What we do know is this. Reportedly, 60 people were interviewed by investigators. 60. And as of right now, there have been 0 arrests. That could mean investigators simply don't have enough evidence to charge anyone. Or it could mean they are being extremely careful before making a move that can never be undone. Let's talk about the theories, because this case has become a lightning rod across every corner of the internet. Theory 1. A tragic drowning. With that much loud music, that many boats packed together and alcohol involved, some believe Nolan simply slipped away from the group, entered the water, maybe near a sudden drop-off, and drowned without anyone noticing in all that chaos. Theory 2. Something happened aboard one of the boats. A growing number of people online believe Nolan never entered the water on his own at all. They believe something happened on one of those boats, an altercation that spiraled out of control, and that his body was later moved, which is why it surfaced on a completely separate, federally owned island days afterward instead of near the actual party. Theory 3. This was always a tragic accident, and outside voices hijacked a grieving family's private nightmare and turned it into a national spectacle it was never meant to be. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Right now, nobody can prove any of these theories. Not the family, not the attorneys, not even, it seems, the district attorney's office. Until that grand jury speaks, or until federal investigators step in, every single one of us is just guessing. But whatever happened out on that water on the night of the 4th of July, one thing is undeniable. An 18-year-old boy with a football career ahead of him, a family who loved him, and a life that had barely begun is dead. His 19th birthday came and went without him. His mother says the hardest part isn't the media attention. It isn't the lawyers. It isn't the theories flooding social media. It's the silence in her house where her son used to be. And on the other side, a group of young men, who may be completely innocent, are living in fear, unable to walk into a store without being recognized and confronted by strangers. Nobody in this story is walking away untouched. Not the family desperate for the truth. Not the young men demanding to be presumed innocent. Not a community torn in half by a case with no clear ending. Yet. So here's where we're left. A grand jury meeting behind closed doors. A federal jurisdiction question nobody has answered. 60 witnesses interviewed, and 0 arrests made. 2 competing autopsies telling 2 different stories. And a family that just wants the truth about the final hours of their son's life. I want to know what you think really happened out on that water. Was this a tragic accident that the internet blew completely out of proportion? Or is there something still being hidden that a grand jury is about to expose? Type your theory below. Drowning or cover-up? I want to see which one wins by the end of this week. And if this case affected you the way it affected me, hit subscribe right now, because the moment that grand jury reaches a decision, we will be the first channel breaking it down for you, piece by piece, exactly like we always do. This has been Untold Crime Diaries. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.